Hey everybody, Marcus here with NextLevelRecording.com and welcome to the final stage, part 3 of mixing drums. Today we'll be focusing on compression. So to keep this video as short and quick to the point as possible, I already went ahead and compressed these drums, so I'm just going to quickly go through my settings and then give you a before and after of compression and then a before and after of EQ and compression just to show you where we started and where we left off. So let's get started. On the kick drum, I am using the classic DBX 160, and this goes on sale all the time from Waves for about 39 bucks, and when it does, I totally recommend getting it because it's amazing. So I'm using a 2-to-1 ratio, and I've adjusted the threshold to get me about 3 dB of gain reduction. Now, because I'm basically turning down the signal with compression, I want to counterbalance that by turning up my gain knob about 3 decibels. Now, you don't have to go the full 3 decibels, but I just like doing that just because I have a little bit of OCD, and I think it sounds great. Cool, off to the snare drum. So the snare drum, I'm just using the compressor that comes with Pro Tools. It's the Dynamic 3 compressor, or the Dyne 3 compressor. And this is a pretty fat snare drum, and I'd like it to be maybe a little bit fatter. So I'm using a 4-to-1 ratio. I have a fastish attack to really clamp down on the transient when the snare drum hits. And along with attack, I have a slowish release. Typically, you want the release to bounce with the song, or you want it to be completely released or just about complete before the next snare hit comes into play. I've also adjusted my threshold to get me anywhere from -3 to -5 dB of gain reduction. And like I said before, I've counterbalanced this by adding the gain back in the makeup gain. And I've pretty much done the same exact settings on my bottom snare mic, except I have a little bit slower attack and a little bit faster release. And I'm still getting about 3 to -5 dB gain reduction, but you can see I only added about 1 decibel of gain back into play. I don't want these snares to really overpower the sound of the snare drum. Yeah, I could turn it down, but I felt like the compressor was just bringing up a little bit too much, so I kept it at 1, and I like the balance between them. So for Tom 1 and 2, it ended up being pretty funny because I ended up using the same exact compressor settings for each drum. Again, I'm using the DBX 160 with a 2-to-1 ratio, and I've adjusted the threshold so I'm getting about 5 decibels of gain reduction. And again, I've added this back into the output gain, but I didn't do the full 5. I adjusted it to 3, and I thought it sounded nice. The hi-hats, I didn't do any compression on the hi-hats. I didn't really feel like it needed it. These drums don't really need that much compression. We had a really good drummer. He's the former drummer of 38 Special, and it's pretty awesome when you get a player like that to play. Now, for the overheads, you could compress these individually like we did with the EQ, but I like to compress these as a whole. So I've routed these by sending them to their own auxiliary track, and I'm using the CLA-2A compressor. It's very simple to use. As you can see, there's only 2 knobs. There's gain and there's peak reduction. I've set the peak reduction to get me about 3 to -5 decibels of gain reduction, and I've brought up the gain from its unity just a tad to bring out a little more life from the overheads. This is a great compressor. Also goes on sale all the time. I recommend looking out for that and doing it because it's classic for drums, even vocals. And I love everything about it. Now, the last thing is the drum bus. So remember, all of our drums are being sent to this auxiliary track, and we can compress them as a whole. Now, again, I'm using the DBX 160. As you can tell from this video, I love this compressor. It's a classic compressor for drums. And this plugin sounds great, and the real compressor sounds amazing as well. Now, on the drum bus, I am doing a 2-to-1 ratio, and this is stereo compressor once you put it on the drum bus. Doing a 2-to-1 ratio, and I've adjusted the threshold to get me about 1 to 2 decibels of gain reduction. Now, I'm not crazy crushing the drum bus, because when you're compressing all of these elements, you can really hear it. So I'm only doing about 1 to 2 B of gain reduction, and I'm really just kind of kissing the compressor just to glue them together. And I've added back only 1 decibel of gain back to the output gain. And that's all the compression I did for these drums. Like I said, this was a great drummer. He's very consistent in his playing, so I didn't really have to do crazy amounts of compression. But let me go ahead and give you a before and after of compression just so you can see the difference. Now, it's going to be very subtle, and compression, if you're a beginner, can be very hard to hear. But you'll hear a slight lift in the drums, a little bit fatter here and there in the kick drum and in the snare drum, and you might hear just a little bit more ambience coming out from them. So let me go ahead and do a before and after. So it's pretty subtle, but it's also pretty big at the same time. Now, compression and it goes a long way. Less is really more in mixing. You don't have to do crazy amounts of compression to get the sound you're wanting. Now, sometimes that's necessary, but we did, very little compression here, and it sounds great. Now, let me go ahead and give you a before and after of EQ and compression, and you'll see where we started with mixing this drum set and then where we ended. Cool. So it's a huge difference. So I recommend going back and checking out part 1 and 2 of this series just to give you an idea of what we did to this particular drum set, how we EQ'd it, and how we compressed it. And I hope you can use these tips to bring your drums to life in your next session. I'm sorry if this video is running really long, but I hope you've made it this far. Use it in your next session. Feel free to leave comments and any questions you may have, and I'll answer them. If you also have any ideas for videos that you want to see, let me know, and I will try to get those up as soon as possible. Please subscribe to us, like us, and follow us on Instagram at Next Level Recording. And until next time, I'll catch y'all later.